On today's episode, we'll talk about starting out sweeping floors at Warner Brothers Studios, MASH, The Goonies, working with Mel Brooks, and of course, Leslie Nielsen's fart machine. Just a little bit of business before we start. There may be a curse word here or there in this episode, so please listen responsibly. As always, our website, theop.io, is up and chock full of tips, tricks, and gooey operator goodness. Make sure to check out The Breakdown, where the best operators in the biz explain shots they have done, The Musings, where we discuss everything from quick tips to larger concepts of storytelling, the answers, the images, and so much more. I may or I may not take a break or two during this episode, but I promise that none of them will be longer than 22 seconds.
Hey everybody, Danny Brown here, creator of the Knuckle Puck, and we at Knuckle Puck Camera are proud supporters of this episode of The Op. The Knuckle Puck is a camera accessory loved by operators and camera assistants alike that allows the operator to pan and tilt with precision and ease. Check it out at knucklepuckcamera.com and make sure to follow us on Instagram at knucklepuckcamera.
Finally, if you are enjoying the podcast, please follow us, write a review, share us with your parents, and talk us up around the water cooler with your friends. So grab a beverage, sit back, and enjoy The Op. Thanks for listening.
Lock it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll.
Rolling. Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, Margaret. Hey, Mark.
And camera set. And action.
Hello and welcome back to the Op Podcast, the podcast where we talk about operating and the art of visual storytelling. I am once again your host, Dave Comides, and we're here at Panavision Woodland Hills in their theater because they are kind enough to let me use it so that you don't hear the dogs in the background in my house, which gets to be frustrating. I'm really excited to have a great guest here, a camera operator who's worked for a long time in the business and the local and just across the industry. Mike O'Shea. Some of Mike's credits, not all of them by any means, because they go on for a long time on IMDb. As a director of photography, CSI Miami, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Robin Hood Men in Tights, which makes me laugh because that's hilarious. As an operator, Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad, because I just had to say that because it's like part of my upbringing. The Lost Boys, which I grew up on. Spaceballs, which I grew up on. The Goonies, which I grew up on. And I think Nick McLean was the director of photography on that. And when I talked to him, he said, Mike O'Shea was my operator and is the best operator I've ever worked with, so I had to put that out there. Miracle on Ice, which was a movie that I remember watching when I was a kid because it was about the 1980s Olympic team, and it was a great. And MASH, which I have to ask you about. And just because it goes so far back, apparently first AC on the TV show Gunsmoke, which is amazing. As far as awards. ASC 2011 winner of the Career Achievement Award. Emmys in 2003, an Outstanding Cinematography for Single Camera Series for CSI Miami, and nominated for the miniseries The 60s for the TV show Relativity and the miniseries The Protected Wife in the same year in 1997. And also Doogie Howser, MD, has done a tremendous amount of stuff and has been a member of the local 659 and then 600 governing board for close to 50 years. So a lot of information and a lot of great stuff. Mike, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
This is fantastic.
It's an honor for me to be here.
It's an honor for me to have you. So tell me about your career. How'd you get into the business?
I tell you how I got into the career. I in high school, I was an athlete. I was a baseball player. And I had opportunities to play in the minor leagues. So I gave it a shot, and it's a long story, and I won't go too far into it, but it's a segue into how I got into the business. I went as far as I could go, and then, I was out of high school. I had gone to junior college, but school wasn't my deal.
Yeah. This is here in California?
In California. I was born and raised in Southern California.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Irish, Italian, Catholic family.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't want to stay in school, so I figured, I got to get a job. I'm 18 years old, 19 years old, whatever it was. So I had an adopted uncle, Henry Lehman. He was a assistant head of the camera department at Warner Brothers.
Oh, wow.
So under Clarence Schwiebert. And so I asked him, I don't know how it was suggested, but I asked him, I said, is there any way I can get any work in the studios? And he said, well, let me look around. And he did, and he had a contact with the labor gang. So he got me on the labor gang at Warner Brothers and
What's the labor gang?
sweeping floors.
Oh, like maintenance. sort of.
Maintenance,
Yeah,
and-
I got
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Okay, but it got you in the studio.
He got me into the studios, yeah. And so he got me into that, and I spent about four years working as a laborer. And, I don't know what clicked or what made me think that this could ever happen. I approached him and I said, I was engaged at the time to my still wife.
Huh.
And this, by the way, was around 1964 by this time. Yeah. And I said, I don't want to be a laborer the rest of my life. How about being a cameraman? Now, I knew nothing about cameras. I maybe hadn't taken a picture in my whole life.
I gotta guess the labor gang to cameraman jump wasn't normal.
Well, I saw that cameramen made a lot of money. I thought, well, maybe I'll
There
try.
you go.
Hey, Henry, what do you think about this?
And you're what? You're like 21 by this point, 22? or
Yeah,
something?
yeah,
Okay.
about 21, yeah. And he said, no, he said, in those days it was all father and son. It was very much that way.
Yeah.
He said it would be very hard. He said, you got no background in it. And he says, yeah, I'm in this position, but I'm not in a position to bump, some cameraman's son.
And was it really that if you weren't the son of some...
It was really like that.
You literally didn't get in.
Yeah, it was really, really hard.
Wow.
He says, how about makeup? I said, well, look at me. I said, do I look like a makeup man?
It's not going to work.
And he says, well, probably not. He said, but there's grip, electric. And I said, well, let me ask you, Henry. I says, what do I have to do to prove that I really want to learn this?
Yeah.
That this is something I want to try to achieve. And he said, well, let me ask you a real important question. You've been playing baseball for a while. Are you done with baseball? And I said, yeah, I think I'm done with baseball, and I think baseball's done with me. And he said, well, I can't promise you anything. But he said, the only thing I can suggest is you work on the labor gang here at Warner's, and this is where Henry was. He says, you get off at 3:30 in the afternoon. He said, come into the loading room and learn the procedures, learn the equipment, learn how to load the mags, learn how to cut the filters, learn what the lenses do.
Wow. And this was when like all of the cameras and everything came out of that one department.
Came out of
right?
that department.
So like every day they'd drop it off at a different, whatever
Yeah,
whatever the
they
order
had
was.
these big, I forget what they call them. They were big blue boxes on wheels that
Yeah.
you loaded the magazines, the cameras, the lenses. They all had their own different compartments.
So like the director of photography and the assistants basically had like a menu, and they sort of went, tomorrow we need XXXX, and they dropped them off.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then that was our job, other than loading the film.
Oh, you know what lit Nick? Sorry to interrupt. I think Nick told me they were called lungs.
Lungs.
Yeah, I don't know why, but
He's right.
yeah.
See, he's got a better memory than me. He'd tell you he doesn't, but he does.
He would tell you.
Yeah.
Nick
Lungs.
I should say Nick McLean, who I've interviewed before for this podcast.
Blue lungs.
Blue
They
lungs.
call them
Okay.
the blue
All right.
lungs. Yeah.
So in the morning when you went on to the studios, these things were being like pulled to each stage and unloaded, basically.
They were loaded at night, and in the morning they were all set up on the stage for the driver to come over, hook them up to the
Wow.
machine, and take
pull
them
'em
to
back.
different stages.
And not to side, but just because I have a question about. So the camera gets dropped off in the morning at stage 12, and they shoot at it with all day. Does then the camera and everything go back to the loading to the camera
loading.
department so that they can they do all the cleaning and the. And
They had
everything?
the service department. They had the mechanics.
So the ACs didn't do any of that.
We didn't clean the cameras. They had a service department.
Okay.
Yeah, and the cameras and the lenses would go to the service department.
Wow.
The loaders would load all the film.
And you just load all day long. That's all you do.
That's all you did. The mags would come in all day long
Wow. Yeah.
and stand out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It was a wonderful way to start out. It was really starting out at the bottom.
Well, you learned everything probably. Right?
Yeah, and I was doing that. I did that for about a year on my own time. I'd get off at 3:30, and I'd go in there, and I'd spend 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night
Wow.
trying to learn that, to try to prove. I mean, I had no other career.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't a great student. I wasn't going to go back to college. I was going to get married, and I thought, well, if I get this opportunity, I got to take it.
Yeah.
And I proved to him that this is really what I wanted. And I did it for about a year every night. Every night I'd go in there. 1965 comes up. I'm getting married in July of that year, and it was June of 1965. And so I think it was either Tim Vanek or one of the Herb Pearl or one of the loaders that was in there was going out on production. There was a couple of them. So a loading position came up.
Sorry, meaning going out like on location? With
Going
the
out
show?
on production. Going out from being a film loader
Yeah.
to an assistant.
Oh, moving up to being an assistant.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's fine.
Yeah. So a position came up for a loader in
Yeah.
early June of that year. And Dick Rawlings Jr. and I were going in. He was a mail boy on the lot. And his father was a DP.
Oh.
And we were both going in at night learning. So that position came up, and of course Dick got it, and I understood that.
Because there was that father-son thing.
Yeah, but he earned it too.
Okay, gotcha.
He would do the same thing. Yeah. He didn't take it for granted that his dad was there. That he was going to get
he
that.
put the time in.
He put the time in, as much time as I did.
Yep.
And he had a background in photography from his father and that. But so he got the job first in June, and then around the end of June, the position came up again. Another loader went out on production. And so they called the union for a loader. And it just happened to be TV had starting up and there was features going on. There was no loaders available in the union. So through Clarence Schwiebert and Henry Lehman, they said, well, listen, we've had a guy come in here for the last year that knows how to load the magazines, knows all our procedures. What do you think? Can we hire him?
Yeah.
And the union said, yeah, we have nobody on the books. Go ahead and hire him. What's his name? And they gave him my name and probably my relationship with Henry, and because Henry was an adopted uncle. I knew him since I was this big.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got in the loading room.
Wow. But did you get into the union, or they made an exception?
No, in those days you had to spend 2 years on a permit.
Wow, 2 years.
2 years on a permit. So I got into that part of it.
Yeah.
But to get into the grouping, you had to be a permit for 2 years.
Wow.
And then after the 2 years, you got sworn into the union.
Okay.
As a Group 3.
Okay.
And that means there was Group 3, Group 2, Group 1.
And that determined how you work.
That determined on how what your availability was and how they hired. Meaning 1, 2, and 3.
So all the Group 1s had to be used up before you went to Group 2, before you went to Group 3. Gotcha.
Right.
Wow.
So I remember getting sworn in with Dick Rawlings and myself, and there was another guy there, but I don't remember. And I remember after they swore me into to the union.
Yeah.
The assistant business head said to me, well, congratulations, you're now Group 3 in Local 659. He said, but I'm going to tell you something, you're going to have a hard time. And I said, why? He said, you're not a relative.
Really? It was
Honest,
that?
I swear to you.
Wow.
And I don't know what I thought. I don't know what I thought to myself, but it must have been somewhere in my subconscious. I thought, well, we'll see about that.
Yeah. What a terrible thing to say to someone.
Well, I don't think he meant it maliciously. He was a nice guy, but it was
maybe he was trying to warn.
But it was something that I was aware.
Yeah.
It was something I was aware of because of the nepotism.
Yeah.
I didn't hold it against people. It wasn't in my makeup. My mother and father told me, you treat people, everybody the same, no matter what situation.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know what my thinking was, but I think subconsciously I said, I've always been kind of a fighter.
So I'm going to prove him wrong.
You want me to prove you wrong?
Yeah. Sometimes that's the best thing,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. And maybe I thought that, maybe I didn't.
So you loaded for 2 years.
2 years in the loading room, yeah.
And then once you're sworn in, though, you go back to loading. And
I went back to my loading job. Yeah. But I'd been in the loading room a little over 2 years, and it was time for me to move out. Dick had already moved out. He went on a show that his dad was doing. Or no, he didn't. He went on actually another show at CBS. And then I remember they needed a second assistant on a TV show down in Tucson, Arizona, a location. And the union was busier than hell. And I don't know how my name came up. Jack Marta was the DP. Bob Marta was the first. I don't remember who the operator was, but I got the call to go to Tucson, Arizona. It was a TV show that only lasted half a season or something.
Yeah. Was it a lot of times that the DP and the assistant of the DP and the operator were father and son, like they worked on the same shows?
I don't know about a lot of time, but yeah, it would happen.
Yeah.
It would happen.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience for me. You know, it was my first time really out on production.
You were loading out there?
I was loading
Okay.
and hitting the slate.
Yeah.
But I was actually hired as a loader.
Okay, but you got on set a little bit and you got to
Oh, I got
figure
on
it
set
out.
all the time. It was
Yeah.
in location. So
That-
you go in the bag and you load and you go out and
So this was going to ask you. So it was in a bag though. Still, I
it was
didn't
in a
know
bag.
when that became a
it
thing.
was in a loading bag.
And what camera is this? Do you remember?
BNC, NC,
Wow.
Mark II,
So those are
Airy.
the big old mags.
Yeah, I get in the middle of summer
Yep.
in Tucson, Arizona.
Sweating.
Sweating. Hung over a little.
That's right, because it's the first time out on location. There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got to do that. I got to do it for the location. And when they went, in those days, when they went back on the stage, they didn't carry a film loader.
Because it went back to the loading
Yeah.
room, right? Yeah.
And if they only had one camera, they only carried one assistant.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
They only carried one assistant. So when they went back to Hollywood here, they had one camera. And I remember Jack Marta and Bob were trying to get me on as a second, trying to
Okay.
keep me as a second.
Which wasn't the norm, you said.
It wasn't a norm.
Yeah.
It didn't happen.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. But in the meantime, it was real busy. So the union called and said they're looking for a second assistant on a TV show called Doctari.
Okay.
And would you be? I don't even think they asked me, would you be interested? They knew I had to be.
It's a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's your call. This would be your call tomorrow. Show up here,
Wow.
and they'll bus you out to Soledad Canyon. So I took that job and worked on Doctari for a couple of seasons. But now I was still a group.
3.
I was a group 3, but it was busy, so I got to go to work.
And if you're on Doctari as a loader and Group 3, if you're on that show, if someone in Group 2 becomes available, do you get bumped? Or
No.
you're on that show, so
No,
you're like,
no.
that's your show?
No, you got the show legally.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't bump.
Yeah.
They didn't pull any political
But once
moves.
it's yours, it's yours.
Yeah,
Unless you lose
yeah.
it.
There's a
obviously.
segue into that actually because it can work around that, but not in that case. No, I was on it, and I was on it for the rest of the season, which was I think most of the season. And I got a lot of good experience. The DP was a little German guy named Fritz Mandel,
Okay.
and the discipline I learned on that show, and learning my job. Glenn Shank was the first assistant. I remember that. I don't remember the operator for some chance, but I got a great grounding, because I spent like 6 months.
So people, even though you weren't, the son of someone or whatever, people were still open to going, let me
Very.
teach you how this is done and sharing
Very,
information.
and Fritz at that time had a son that he wanted to get in,
Oh, okay.
but he didn't. He was such a wonderful man. He said, I'd love to get my son in this position,
Yeah.
but that isn't fair.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm glad I remembered that
Yeah.
because, because I actually, if I ever had a chance, I'd try to help his son.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got to work that show for 6 months, and the show shut down. And then the next season, now I may have moved up to Group 2 at that time. By that time,
Did you move up because of just like after so many years of experience?
it was years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or it was years. Yes. Yeah. I think I was eligible at that time from being sworn in to move up to Group 2. But when they went back the next year, Fritz wanted the same crew back. But the union said, well, no, you can't take O'Shea because he's a Group 2. And it wasn't busy enough. You
got to take a Group 1.
You got to take a Group 1.
Oh, so for year to year, it could potentially change. You
it
just
could
couldn't change in the
yeah,
middle of the season.
Yeah,
Oh, I
because of
see.
the grouping.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Somehow they worked it out. The guy that they were doing 2 shows out in Soledad, Africa, USA, it was called. I forget the other one. Cowboy something.
Africa USA was like a
It was a compound
like a compound for production.
for production, for Dr.
Sure,
It's supposed to be in Africa.
Okay.
Yeah, and they had all the wild animals out there. So they brought in, they had to hire another guy. But there was another show, and Fritz, I think, somehow, or Glenn Shank, the AD, said to the other guy, I forget his name, I wish I could remember it because he was wonderful about it. They said, look, we can get you on the other show. We'd like to hire a guy we had back last year.
Mm-hmm.
And the man agreed to it. He said, well, I don't care.
Yeah,
as
long as I'm working.
It doesn't matter to me.
That's
so
great.
he moved over, and I got to go back for a second season
Oh, that's fantastic.
on Dr.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how I accumulated time and experience.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, the experience, and today too, I know, was invaluable.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like I started at the bottom. My background in life was not photography.
Yeah.
So every step of the way.
It was all new.
It was all new. I mean, learning how to be a good second assistant, how to service the first assistant, the operator and the DP.
Uh-huh.
And it was ingrained in me, take every step seriously. We all wanted to be operators, we thought, and take every step, because when you get to that, all of this experience is really going to pay off for you.
Yeah.
You're going to know every phase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I one of my first interviews that I have up is Rochelle Brown, who's a young Steadicam operator, and one of the things that she said, because she was Bob Richardson's PA for like a year or 2 years or whatever, and she said sort of something similar, which I think is valuable, which is, you know what, I don't want to be a PA forever, but I'm a PA right now, so I'm going to be the best PA I can be.
Perfect.
And when I move to the next thing, I'll be the best, second AC or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question though. When you're on the lot, your camera and your lenses go back to the camera department at night, and they do them. But when you're on location like that, do the assistants then do
Yes,
all
the
that?
first assistant did.
So the first assistant.
He
so
serviced the camera.
so they did know how to do that.
They did
because
know
they
how
had
to do
know
it.
how to
It was
do that.
oiling it and checking the
Yeah, exactly.
movement. And,
Well, especially I'm
and
thinking
cleaning the
Soledad
lenses.
Canyon. There's probably a lot of dust. And all
yeah,
that
there
stuff.
was, yeah.
So it didn't go back at the end of the night. It stayed
No,
there.
it stayed out in the
Yeah, yeah.
truck. But the first assistant, and I would stay there too, and they would teach me what they were doing.
Yeah.
But they would service the cameras.
Well, it sounds like you were just interested in learning, because that's usually, I mean, those are the people that I always glom to, are like people who want to learn. I absolutely want to.
I did.
Give them the
I
information.
did. I don't know what the alternative would have been.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not knocking being a laborer the rest of your life. I would never knock that. But if I had an opportunity,
Yeah.
and I was blessed to know somebody that got me into the studios, that told me this is what you need to do, no promises.
Yeah.
But if you do this and show that you're really interested in it and see how you do, I mean, I got that opportunity. I didn't want to blow it, and I just gotten married.
Yeah. Well, and there's that. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm getting married, and I get into the camera union 3 weeks before I get married. I mean, if that isn't a gift from somebody.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah. So, but at this point on Dr. you were still a loader, but you were doing.
I was second, and I was hired as a second
You're hired-
assistant, but the second assistant loaded.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, so it was just the first and the second, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And then how long did you second for?
I seconded for, I'll go to this because this is what I remember. I seconded as a second and a first a total of 6 years.
Wait, you seconded as a first? What?
No, I was a second assistant,
Uh-huh. Oh, and a first assistant.
and then I moved up in a couple years
Gotcha.
to first. But as a total,
Total, it was 6 years.
it was 6 years, which
Gotcha.
was unheard of in those days,
What would it normally be? You mean to then move up to operating? You're saying
to move up to operator.
what would a normal time spend like? How
In
how
those
long?
days, let me tell you something, because I know I was doing a movie with Andy Laszlo. Ernie Laszlo. It was called Daddy's Gone a Huntin', and they had an old-time operator, was a sweetheart, was an A operator, was the top 5 in the operating
You remember his
field.
name?
Kaimi Mead.
Say it again.
Kaimi Mead.
Kaimi Mead. That's
Wonderful,
a name.
wonderful, wonderful man.
Yeah.
And I remember one day, we've been on the picture for a long time. Bill Bonney was the first, and he was a top first assistant, and he taught me a lot. I got behind the camera that they were rehearsing or something, and I was just playing around with the wheels, and Kaimi came up to me, And he whispered gently, he said, "You're the second assistant on this show. You have a ways to go before you sit on that seat." I think I probably was shaking when he said it. And he didn't say it maliciously.
No, he was just letting
In
you
other
know.
words, he's telling me what I've been learning as an assistant from first, said that, is that learn your job.
Yeah.
Learn your job.
Yeah.
Learn this job.
Yep.
And I didn't forget that, but it was fun to get on those wheels.
Sure.
And but being a second and a first for 6 years only. In 1970, I worked on Gunsmoke. You kind of mentioned Gunsmoke.
As a first AC, I think.
I was first on the B. John Flynn was on the A.
John Flynn.
Yeah,
Okay.
John Flynn was on the A. He was a very close.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
just ran into his son the other day at a union thing. Actually.
Yeah.
John Flynn the fourth, and
Fourth.
apparently there's a fifth. Like there were.
There's
his
a
son
fourth.
I think he said his son is John Flynn the fifth.
Oh, his
son.
son. Yeah.
So they're keeping that.
Well, they
alive.
got to keep that going. I mean,
Can't get rid of that.
that's a legend.
I know exactly.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So.
But in those 6 years, I would bounce. When Gunsmoke was done, Gunsmoke would shoot from June to December, and they would shut down. June to December, and then they'd pick up in March and shoot to June. Now, there was a big gap.
Yeah.
June to September, I think, and then shut down.
Okay.
And in between, I would get calls to go out, either on a B first job or a B second. I never turned down a job.
Yeah.
If one day, no matter what, and I think that was ingrained in me. Don't turn down a job.
Yeah.
Because you never know who you're going to meet. You never know where your name is going to be passed. If you're on unemployment and the one day will ruin your unemployment, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to build a career.
That's excellent advice.
Yeah, you're trying to build a career, and you never know who you're going to meet.
Yeah. I just do you know Sean Bobbitt, cinematographer?
I know of him,
Yeah.
of course.
He's a good friend of mine. I just interviewed him. And Sean just finished a movie called Marvels, which is one of these big Marvel, DC, whatever. I think it comes out next week. But the director on that was a woman who used to be his PA who picked him up in New York City on a movie 10 years ago or something. And she was talking about a short movie that she wanted to make, and he was giving her advice and talking to her, and she eventually made that, and it became a hit, and she did something else, became a hit, and then she got this massive movie, and she called Sean up and said, "I don't know if you remember me." And he goes, "Of course I remember you. Would you shoot this for?" "Of course I'll shoot this." So, you got this massive Marvel movie because he was nice to the PA back in the day. You just never know.
No, be nice to everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
Let me, before I forget, with the two questions. One is, so when you first started out, were you part of the studio system where you really were sort of working for Warner Brothers and they said, "You're going to this show, you're going to this show," or was that like after the studio system?
It was kind of after it.
After,
Yeah,
okay.
it was really after it because when I left the loading room, I went to CBS. That's when I went
Okay.
on Doctari.
Oh, Dr. was CBS.
Yeah,
okay.
probably if there had been probably something at Warner Brothers,
Yeah.
I don't think it would have been the studio system. They would have probably sent me out.
But you were working basically for the show, not for the studio where they went, "You'll go here today and there tomorrow."
No.
But before
No.
that it was. And at the beginning, were you still at the point where like camera operators were wearing coats and ties and stuff? Or
Yeah.
was that, really? Mm-hmm. When did that change? Like 60?
with me, with Nick McLean.
With Nick McLean. the coat and tie and the flip-flops. That's great. Yeah.
No, probably with Nick.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Probably in like the early 70s.
Probably
or late
the early
60s or something.
70s, yeah.
Okay.
Because I know I didn't wear a coat and tie. I never wore a coat and tie, I don't think.
So you were part of that new wave, I guess, that was coming in. Yeah.
Well, I became an operator in '73.
Okay.
Yeah.
You remember the first thing you operated on?
A thing called Love Story. It was an anthology series at Paramount.
I think I saw
And this is a story I really want to talk about.
Yeah.
I started to say, when I wasn't, I would never turn down a job.
Yeah.
And I would get some work at Paramount. Working as a second or a first. And when I was a first, I would even take jobs as a second.
Just to keep working
Just
and
keep
meet
working.
people.
I mean, I had a family. I had a young family.
Sure. And that wasn't a union problem. You could jump back and forth back then.
You
It
could
wasn't.
you could jump back and forth, yeah. And I met Ted Winchester. He was the head of the camera department at Paramount at the time.
Was that a big thing back then to like know that? I mean, like if you were in good with the heads of the camera department, did that help get your name out to people? Because was that who people called for?
I think it helped, but I think it helped when you got a call there. You didn't know him.
Yeah.
You know, you got a call from the department, but when you went on a show and somebody said, "Hey, send this kid back to us,"
Yeah. Then it was.
and you know, he would hear that.
Oh well, this
Yeah.
is a good thing. So
This
I'll
is a
keep
good
doing
thing
it.
if he's available.
Gotcha.
You know.
Yeah.
And I would get some work at Paramount, and I went back when Gunsmoke went back. I went back in Gunsmoke on the B camera first, and the show shut down, and it was June, and Ted Winchester called me. He said, "Mike, listen, I got an opportunity here." He said, "I know you're doing Gunsmoke, and I know the schedule on that." He said, "But Howard Schwartz is looking for a first AC." And he said, "Would you come in and interview with him?"
Howard Schwartz was a DP.
DP, yeah. And he was very instrumental in my career.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, sure, absolutely, thank you, Ted." And I went in and I met Howard, and he was an ASC member and multiple Emmy winner, and he interviewed me, and it was the new day of the zoom lens.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I got the job, and Chris Schwiebert was the operator. And I could follow focus. I'd learned how to follow focus. But in those days, the first AC follow focus and zoomed.
Okay.
And Howard was so patient with me. I was terrible. I felt sorry for Chris.
At getting the zooms
Getting the
smoothly and
zooms
timing
and trying to
everything.
keep people in focus.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
I don't know how people did that.
I know. I was very mechanical.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And Chris Schwiebert took the brunt of it because he was the operator, and he was such a sweetheart that he was trying to protect me.
That's great.
And Howard, Howard was tough, but he was very fair, and he would say, "No, Mike, you got to learn how to do this. You got to learn how to do this," and I did, but I had a lot of help from Chris. Ended up leaving, getting a movie, and we got another older operator, Bud Brooks. He came in and they worked with me and they taught me, and Bud was. He was getting up in years. And Howard said to me finally after a while, he says, if you stay with me for 3 years, I'm still in my late 20s.
Yeah.
I'll make you an operator. Now, it was unheard of.
Wow.
It was unheard of. I said, he said, because you can go back on, I know Gunsmoke starting in September.
Yeah.
You can go back on that. He said, but if you stay with me, I promise, in 3 years, I will make you an operator. And so I went and I talked to the DP on Gunsmoke. And Howard and Monk Askins were very good friends. They grew up together in the business. And Monk said to me, "Mike, if Howard makes you that promise, you can take that to the bank. You'd be foolish." Because Monk had John. And he probably, I think he made John an operator.
Yeah. Oh, so he moved him up eventually.
Yeah, I think he did, yeah.
Yeah.
He said, "So do that." And well, in 3 years, Bud wanted to retire. And he says, "Here you are."
Wow. And so you were basically 30, give or take?
I was 30 years old.
And so for a 30-year-old to be an operator, most people didn't, it sounds like, get
Not
to be
in
an
those
operator
days. It
until they
was
were
very
40
rare.
or so.
It was very rare.
Wow.
It was very rare.
Was that daunting?
Scarier than hell. Because every step of the way I thought, well, I'll just stay an assistant. There's nothing wrong with this.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. So I had fear about it. I had a lot of fear about it. I thought, ooh. And Howard says, "No, you're going to be an operator." And it wasn't like I could get on and make a lot of shots all the time. And we were doing a TV show called Love American Style. Remember that show?
Yeah.
And I was the first. Bud was the operator. And then finally, towards the end of the season, and Bud's going to retire, Howard says, "Now you got to jump on the camera, and we're going to let you start doing some shots."
Yeah.
Now, the biggest deal for me was just trying to keep anybody in a picture.
So, but he was standing next to you or right nearby to
Yeah, but
give
they
you
didn't
guidance.
have monitors.
Yeah, no, that's what
Yeah.
I was going to say.
He didn't have.
And were you was this parallax or were you looking through the lens? Well, what kind of camera was it?
No, it was a reflex.
It was a reflex. So you're actually
BNC.
you're at least looking through the
Yeah.
monitor.
Oh my God.
But
if
there was
I'd-
no video assist at all.
no
right?
video assist.
Wow,
And so towards the end of the season, he says, every once in a while, I want you to get on here,
that's cool.
and I want you, and and I would. And of course, he would watch me, and Bud would watch me, and they could tell when I missed or whatever. And the directors were all real patient. But we'd go to dailies the next day, and and I was happy to just keep them in the picture. To be honest with you,
They're in the center.
they're
What's
in,
the problem?
in the center. I mean, what's composition? Look at I got them. Yeah, but this person was supposed to be in it too. And we go to dailies, and Howard would say, "Well, do you see what mistake you made?" And I would say, "Well, I guess I was supposed to hold this guy to it, or whatever it was."
Yeah.
And he says, "Let me explain to you about composition."
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah. He said, "Let me explain to you." He says, "Let me explain why you had too much headroom and where the headroom should be for that size." So I got a schooling.
That's incredible.
Very patient. He was a disciplinarian,
Yeah.
but he was just very patient, and he wanted to teach. He was a great teacher. So I learned from Howard Schwartz. He gave me the basis, and he explained every step of the way. So finally, it comes up in August of '73. Now he's going to make me the operator. I'm the operator. I'm going to be the A operator. And it was on an anthology show called Love Story. And Michael Landon was the first director who was very creative. And Howard said to me before the first day, he said, "Now look, if we lay out a shot and you feel like it's beyond what you can do, wink at me." And he says, "I'll make an excuse that I didn't want to do the shot."
I need to keep my eye. I got to look at the lighting or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
The first shot was on an Elemac
Oh my gosh, that old dolly that weighed
that
12,000
that you had to walk behind with the BNCR, bringing a person in the door, panning, going down a hallway with them, taking them into a couch, dialogue, bringing them up, going back, taking them down a hallway, taking them into a bathroom.
This is your first shot as
This
an
is my
operator.
first shot. Now they're laying this shot out, and I'm winking like this. Howard he's just smiling. I'm going, "Oh my God."
I have this image of you in the back of the room, and someone's like, "What's wrong with him?"
I'm winking. Don't you see it? And I think he's kind of chuckling.
Yeah.
And then bringing him out and letting him exit. And it was hard. The key to me being able to make that shot was his patience, Michael Landon's patience as a director. He didn't know I was a new operator at the time. Howard hadn't told him yet. In the dolly grip. We had a great dolly grip. Jimmy Robinson his name was an old English guy.
Someone that you had worked with before? So you
Yeah,
had
as an assistant.
Yeah.
And he was one of the top guys.
So he knew that you were just moving up.
Yeah.
probably. So
And he knew what I needed to know.
yeah.
And they all their information, I try to store it somewhere.
Sure.
And through the little bit of experience I had with Howard, when they would let me on the camera and, show me what proper headroom was for different sizes and how to lead a person,
Yep.
I had an idea by this time what I needed to do. I didn't have a problem, because I was an athlete, I didn't have a problem with eye-hand coordination.
Okay. Yeah.
I could do that. It was just finding the right compositions and telling the story with the composition.
Sure.
And I got that schooling from Howard,
Sitting in dailies. you
sitting
mean,
in dailies because he didn't have a monitor.
Yeah.
And so we went through all of this, and we'd go through the day's work, and we'd go to the dailies next day, and I would get a lot of elbows, He'd elbow me. He said, "Why'd you do that?" I had to do something, And he said, and then after dailies, he would explain to me, "See, if you'd have moved it over a little to the left," and then he would give you frame lines and that, He would say, "I want you to hold this here, or this," and I try to get him. And if I'd fudge a little bit, I'd try to fudge back. And he'd say, "If you would have let him a little more here,
You would have landed.
That would have landed with the dolly grip. You got the best dolly grip in Hollywood.
That's great.
That would have landed the way you needed it.
So was he generally sitting behind? I mean, not on a smaller shot. Would he be sitting behind the camera, the director of photography?
You mean while I was making a shot?
Yeah, yeah.
He'd be next to me.
Just right next to you.
Next to me.
And
yeah.
and so was it the kind of thing without video assist? Because I started when I started out video assist. There was video assist, but we didn't always have it. But
Yeah.
then most of my career we've had video assist. Was it the kind of thing that after you did a shot, he would know where you messed up? Like, could they tell?
A lot of the time, not all of the
Yeah.
time.
So
you
he'd
know.
come over and be like, "You cut their headroom there, didn't you?" or something to that effect.
Sometimes,
Wow.
but definitely in dailies.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
of course.
But he made it so that when we were laying out shots,
Yeah.
that I looked at every frame because he would lay out the shots.
Yeah.
You know, he would lay them out. And he said, "Now look, this is what I want you to do here. You know, hold this headroom across here.
Yeah.
And when you land here, hold this here. I
Yeah.
got a reason for that." And if I was smart enough, I'd ask him what the reason was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, what's the reason? Because I was also taught no question is too dumb.
Oh, okay. Yeah, excellent. Yes.
You
Yeah,
know,
I
no
would agree.
question. Don't feel dumb by asking me a question.
Yep.
You know, so if I say, "Hey, I want you to land here," and I got a reason for it, ask me what the reason is.
Yeah, because that informs your decision making.
That informs me. You know, it gives me more information to get that for him.
Yep.
You know, he says, "You're an operator now, but down the road you got to think like a cameraman."
Mm-hmm.
You know, think like a cameraman. I tried to pass that on to operators I had.
Yeah.
And that basis, that just the education and the friendship I got from him,
Yeah. That sounds amazing.
it gives me chills, to be honest with you, because you know, to speak of him, getting that opportunity and the honesty that he said, "Stay with me for 3 years, I'll make you an operator," it was unheard of.
Yeah.
It was unheard of.
Did you question whether he was being realistic?
No, I don't think I did.
Yeah, he was just the type of
because I
person
knew
who-
he was a straight shooter.
Yeah.
He was very direct.
Well, he clearly saw something in you, and he liked you.
Yeah, he liked
so
me. And even though I was the worst Zoomer in town,
Did you get better?
I got better.
Okay.
I got pretty good at it,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. I was going
But
to
I got good at it because of his patience.
Sure.
I mean, there might have been other guys say, "Hey, you're not going to cut it.
Yeah.
You got to know how to zoom and follow
Or
focus."
let's get someone in here who can
Yeah.
do it. You cut it on your own time, not mine.
Yeah, learn it somewhere else.
Yeah.
But he didn't.
Wow.
You know, and he could have gone on to somebody else. But there was something about me I guess he liked, you know, and so I did learn it. I did become a pretty decent assistant.
Yeah.
But once again, I was taught early on in the loading room, learn every position.
Yeah.
Learn every position. And I learned it on sets. Be the best second you can be the best first you can be.
Yeah.
Operator if you make operator, if you make DP.
But I think it also helps you because if you know those positions that you've come through, when you're asking stuff of other people, you know what goes into that. You understand what the hurdles are, and you're just that much more informed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just makes more sense.
Yeah.
To understand all those things. Do you remember what the biggest hurdle about jumping to operating was? I mean, was it just remembering composition, or was it landing frames, or was it communication, or?
Communication wasn't a problem because it was Howard.
Yeah.
And like I say, Michael Landon was the first director, who was a real sweet man, very creative, and it was, you know, we had the old Elamac dollies and
I haven't heard those in a long
BNC
time.
R's, no rotating, and you know, Michael Landon.
Well, that's right. The eyepiece was just
It was
just solid.
It was solid, and Michael Landon. That first shot was tough enough,
Yeah.
but then it got even worse.
Because he was trying to push the limits.
He pushed the limits.
Yeah.
Limits as I saw him at the time,
Absolutely.
anyway. Because he would start down here, and you know you couldn't adjust the
Down
eyepiece.
way low, so you had to get your whole
Yeah.
body down there.
Yeah,
Oh
and
my
then
gosh.
he would do shots where you'd come up and have to walk over the dolly
Yep.
and come around.
Oh, yeah.
And the dollies were, and the arms rising. This is where the dolly grip came in.
Yeah.
Jimmy Robinson, because I mean I was young, so I could get down.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't get down there today. You know, you'd have to start it, and maybe I could finish the up
Maybe two of
position.
us on
Yeah.
it. Exactly.
But Jimmy Robinson would say, "Okay, Mike, here, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make this easier for you." It would still be difficult, because it would be low and then it would end up high over somebody's shoulder or whatever. He said, if I pulled the back of the dolly around here, I can still make the move you need to get to here.
Yeah.
And that was a big help.
But you've got more space on the dolly.
I
or
got
something
yeah,
like that.
or it was easier, or he'd build
Sure.
something so I could
Yeah.
walk up across the dolly.
He was filling in the gaps that you didn't know yet.
He was
right?
filling in the gaps that I had no idea of.
So how long was that? You said it was an anthology. Was it an anthology? When you say an anthology, is that sort of like what a limited series would be today? Like it's like six or seven.
It was supposed to
episodes?
be more.
Okay.
But it only went 15 episodes.
15. Okay, so it wasn't a full year, but
It wasn't a full season. In those days, they did 22 or 24.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
after 15, it got canceled.
oh, I got you.
It was a very good series. So.
And at the end of that 15, did you feel okay? I'm an operator. I can go on a show and do what I need to do, or like how long did
I
it
felt
take?
better, but I didn't feel that confident.
How long do you think it took you till you felt confident?
I don't know if I'm confident today.
You never got there. Someone asked me the other day, and I was helping teach a workshop, and they said, "What shots have you done where you finish and you go, I nailed that?" And I looked around and I said, "I don't think I've ever done that. All I think of is what could be better." And I looked at the other guys who were teaching it. Anybody? And, no, I've never done that.
I think I just said the same thing.
Yeah, it's just-
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever perfect.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever perfect. It's good. It's. I don't want to say just good enough, but when you go to dailies, of course with the monitors now you got everybody looking.
Yeah.
But when you go to dailies in those days and the DP went right on, you hit it.
Yeah.
Inside, I might have probably felt, did I really?
It could be better or whatever.
It could have been better here,
Well, it's the other thing I always think is I'd rather them be happy and me be unhappy than me be happy and them be unhappy, because after
Yeah.
all, I'm working for them. So
But
at the end-
in my head, my
at the end.
crazy head, I used to say, what makes them so happy about that? Didn't they see that little bump in the
quietly
middle?
though.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So basically, and how long did you work with Howard for? Did you work along?
The next thing with Howard was he says, then I'm going to keep you for 3 years and I'm going to make Rick Neff the operator,
Okay.
because he was the first.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. But through Howard's contacts, after the 15 episodes, now I'm a new operator,
Yeah.
So now what do I do?
Yeah.
But through his contacts, I got a call from Teddy Voigtlander's assistants. They were doing Little House on the Prairie pilot. And because Teddy and Howard were good friends, Howard said, my show went down. Can you help? Can you help?
And that's Michael Landon, who you knew.
Michael Landon, yeah. And they had a B camera. Kenny was his operator. Was been his operator for Kenny. I can't remember his last name. They had a B camera on Little House on the Prairie pilot, and so through Howard, Teddy hired me on the B camera on Little House on the Prairie. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of this has to do with Howard because he had a lot of contacts.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of confidence in me. I mean, I had a lot to learn still,
Yeah.
even though after 15 episodes, I was still nervous about it. I mean, I think operating is the best job on the set. I don't think it's the easiest job on the set.
No. It
And
is
if anybody tells you that,
Yeah.
that wasn't my experience because there's so much to learn every day.
Yep.
Because if you pay attention as you're an operator, if you ever want to be a DP, and you pay attention to what people are teaching you, and what you can give to that job, it makes it easier when you move up. I think the basis of being a good DP sometimes, this is my opinion, I know it's from the old school, is that each step can make you better.
No question.
You
no
know.
question. Yeah.
But I got to go on Little House on the Prairie, and from that, making that contact, I would get so I'd get a lot of B cameras, and then Howard would get another show. He would get big miniseries and Rich Man, Poor Man. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yep.
And that was a big 8-hour miniseries, and it was a big deal. Nick Nolte and I got to be the A operator on that, and the director took a real liking to me. And it was difficult. The shots were very difficult, but I just made up my mind that I had the best teacher in Hollywood, as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
I had the best teacher in Hollywood, and there was no monitors. But I had a background now. I knew what he wanted. I paid attention to what he told me. And I got to be smooth. Like I said, I didn't have a problem turning the wheels. I could follow people.
Yeah.
It was learning compositions and learning what does the composition mean?
What story is it telling?
What is it telling?
Yeah.
Just because you give a guy a nice lead, that doesn't mean it's telling the story.
Yep.
Because he's looking camera right, you got to lead him more to the right. That doesn't tell the story. And today I see it differently. I mean, now I see the opposite framing. They're looking to the short side.
Yeah.
In those days, if I missed it, I missed it.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. You always led the look.
Yeah.
Now you see it differently, and I think at first it was kind of jarring.
Yeah.
But if you got any kind of artistic ability, you kind of got to understand.
Yep.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
I think what's changed is people. I call it psychological framing. I think back in like the 70s, there was just classic framing.
Yeah.
This is what you did, and now the rules have sort of gone out. There aren't any hardcore rules that you have to abide by. It's more people are willing to take more chances.
I think that's really a good point. I think that's an excellent point. And in the days me coming up, it was more classic.
Yeah.
And it worked for a long time.
Absolutely.
And I remember when I see some of this stuff now, because I watch a lot of stuff. I love movies. I love art films. And I see all this different kind of framing. Back then, if I would have framed something like that, I could have got my ass chewed
You're
out.
out the door.
What the hell's that?
Well, and also nobody would have known it, right, until dailies. So it's
Yeah,
it's not
but
like,
if my mind would have
Yeah.
said, look at the emotion here,
Yep.
they would say, no, the emotion's
the
here.
emotions there.
And that didn't make it wrong because,
No, absolutely. And I think also the other thing is maybe because there's so much content out there and things have changed, I think audiences have also become more sophisticated. One of the things I always say when I'm on set is, obviously, as an operator, one of your jobs is to make sure that you're on the correct side of the line for, coverage and whatever. And I get into these scenarios, a lot of times with doorways it happens, but, we're just physically, you're fighting to get on the correct side of the line. And the other side of the line is actually a much better shot because of what lines up and this and that and the other. So usually I'll go to the DP and say, look, is there any way I could be on the other side of the line lighting-wise? And if they're okay with that, I'll go to the director and go, I think we should jump the line here because there's two people talking. Everybody's going to know who's talking. There's a physical reason. This is a better shot. And the real thing is if you jump the line, is anybody going to get confused? And if they don't get confused, then why does it make a difference?
well, I'm going to give you my take on that.
Yeah.
I used to get confused. I do not anymore.
You used to get confused when you saw it being done, or when trying to remember what the line was.
No. I learned the line again.
Yeah. You're saying when you're watching a show.
I used to when I first started seeing it.
Yeah.
I said, well, they're looking the wrong way. They're both looking. They're looking at themselves.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me at all.
It doesn't
now.
bother you at all.
And I mentioned this to another cameraman the other day, and I said, that stuff just doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
He said, well, that isn't the way we learn.
I know. Well, I think there was a slow, gradual process of people. But there's one director I work with who, when you're doing a phone call and you're cutting back and forth, and one's in Australia and one's in New Zealand or whatever it is, he has a thing where they got to be looking the correct side of the line. And I always look at him and I go, no one's going to get confused about who's talking on the phone, no matter where they're talking on the phone. But there's some people who just, it's very sort of, nope, this is the way it is. So
yeah, and it's okay.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely,
okay.
absolutely.
What I like about it is it's bold.
It gives you more options.
Yeah,
Is what it comes
and
down
I mean,
to.
I didn't get in an argument with you. It was just a conversation I had. He said, "This is the way we learned, and that was the right way to do it." Well, it was the right way to do
Absolutely.
it. It was the right way
That's
to do
correct.
it. But I go to a movie to enjoy a movie.
Yeah.
And I do see it, and once in a while I say, well, they're looking in the same direction. So what?
But you also probably see that because you're trained to look for it. I don't think the average audience.
The average, like I say to my wife,
following the story.
My wife, you see, she said, what?
Stop talking to me during the movie.
Yeah, I'm trying to pay attention to the movie, and I got to give a lot of credit to the new generation.
Yeah.
They're teaching old generation new tricks.
Well, and what I always tell people is you absolutely have to know the line. You have to understand the line. And you just have to understand that there are times you can get away with it, but that's not the norm. Normally, you just got to keep everything because you don't want to confuse.
I wish I'd have said that.
Yeah.
I wish I'd have said
Just
that,
say
Dave.
So do you remember when video taps came in?
Was it the middle to the late 70s, I think.
Okay. The reason I ask is, do you remember did that change the way you not the way you operated? I mean, you still pan the same way. You still
It didn't change that.
But did it change sort of suddenly knowing that everybody's seeing what you're doing? Did that either allow you to take more chances, or did it make you less concerned that you were getting exactly what they want because they're actually seeing it at that moment? You know, I kind of wonder whether that sort of mentally changed how people operated.
Did it change? No, I think growing up the way I grew up, the director trusted the operator.
Yeah.
Because he was the only one seeing it through the lens.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at first it bothered me because why do you need all those people seeing what I'm doing if you don't trust me?
You mean when video
came out?
Yeah. Yep.
And I remember
Why are they looking over my shoulder?
Yeah,
basically?
they're looking over my shoulder.
Yeah.
And I remember doing a panel with, they had 5 or 6 operators. We did a panel at Pepperdine in probably the early 80s.
Uh-huh.
And I think Mike Benson and Tom Lockridge, myself. I don't know if Johnny Toll was there. I don't remember, but there was 5 or 6 of us. And that was one of the questions. So video was out then. Am I right about the years? I'm not sure.
I think video was definitely out in the 80s.
Yeah.
It might have been not been on everything.
And I
but
think that
was
was one of the questions that you just asked from the students.
Yeah.
And when it came to me, I said, well, in a way it bothers me because there was a trust issue. The DP trusted your eye, or you wouldn't have been there, and the director trusted your decisions that the shot was that he wanted you got. So I said I think it does bother me. Later on, it didn't.
Yeah.
The longer it was around,
Well, like everything, it's a process.
it was a process, and but the more people you get around a monitor, the more opinions you're going to get. Yep. And that bothered me a little bit.
I know that one of the things that I fight now, and fight is probably not the right word, but the reality is almost everybody on the set has actually a better picture than I do now because they're looking at these 27-inch monitors
that's
that
true.
are perfectly tuned. And even hair and makeup, they're looking at their monitors. So there's things where I'll see a flyaway, a piece of hair sticking out, and I'll think I'm going to go mention that. And I still will, but there's part of me that goes, well, they're looking at it. They must be okay with it. But then they may be on their phone or whatever. So it's weird because there's this weird thing when you know that everybody else is looking at actually almost more information than you have. It messes with your head a little bit. I mean, my job is still to make sure everybody, we're okay with this and that works. And, we're moving on. Did you see this part? Yeah, we're going to cut around it or whatever. But there's that part when I'm bringing it up, then I go, well, they already saw it, they know,
or maybe they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I always bring it up. But it's sort of like it changes things a little bit, and it's funny because I remember the SOC and the motto is we see it first, and I joked around and said. It should be we eventually get to see it because everybody else is these huge monitors, but it does change things. So you at some point, I have to ask you about this because I grew up on this. You worked on MASH.
Yes.
Was Richard Thorpe there when you worked on MASH? Richard Thorpe was the DP on ER with me, and
Richard Thorpe was the second assistant. I love the kid.
I can't imagine.
Cockiest guy in the world.
I love the fact that you call him the kid. What was working on MASH like?
It was fun. Bill Jurgensen was the DP.
Yeah.
I remember how I got that job. Oh no, I worked with Bill as an assistant on some movies of the week.
Yeah.
And I was an assistant first. And I think I went to go work B camera with him on some things. And he had been on MASH for 4 years already. It was the 5th year I did.
Okay.
And I think Dominic Palmer was his operator, and he'd moved up, I guess, or something. And Bill called me to operate on the show. And of course I took it. I mean, it was great. And Johnny Jensen was the first, and Richard Thorpe was the second. But it was wonderful.
We shot
single camera.
Yeah.
Single camera, yeah. And when we go out to the ranch in the compound, there'd be 2 cameras out there.
Okay.
But most of it was done on stage.
Yeah.
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 And it was good. The actors were great. Bill Jurgensen was another good teacher. And this was another thing I want to bring up for operators that happened to me on television.
Yeah.
Television was really my training ground. You know, I did features as an assistant, and I do a lot of B cameras, features, B camera operating on features. But learning operating was my background. I learned how to operate a camera on television.
Mm-hmm.
And on MASH, when you went in the morning, especially when you're out on the compound, mainly when you're out on the compound, you got on the Chapman crane in the morning. You got off at lunch, and you got back on it after lunch.
You run it all day.
All day. Not every day, but most of the time.
Wow.
So you had to know the Chapman crane.
And the Chapman was the one where you had the turret,
You had the turret,
crank
which,
on the
as
side.
you know, you're an
Yeah.
operator,
Yeah.
and they put the extension on.
Yep.
You know, when you got to start back panning, and that frame is going.
Oh yeah.
So
I hated that thing.
I hated it.
Because you're turning that crank. For anybody who doesn't know, basically you're on a turret, and because it's a little hard to explain without visuals, but because you can't pan, you can only pan so much before your body doesn't move. You actually have to pan
The whole
this
turret.
crank, and you pan the whole turret. And what are you turning? Like you're turning 300 pounds. You and
You're
an
turning
assistant
your
and
weight, the camera weight,
400 pounds.
and the assistant. And if
Yeah.
you got a 300-pound assistant, you're pushing him around.
There's that too. I
Yeah,
remember
but-
those days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so you had to be smart.
Yeah.
You got a thin assistant.
Oh yeah.
I'm
But-
just kidding.
But that was reality. Physics is reality. But
Yeah.
I remember trying to turn that crank, and I mean, I remember I would try to figure out shots where I would just try to do it just on the regular head and get my body somehow around it, just so I wouldn't have to turn that stupid thing. But yeah, that was
I would do that too.
that was not.
I would
easy.
stretch as far as I could
Yeah,
to
yeah.
not use that
Because
turret.
it was geared correctly, but it was just such a slog to
yeah.
turn that
and
thing.
you're pushing all that weight around.
Yeah, and you're
Or
operating.
pulling.
And you're
and
operating, at
the
the same
camera.
time. Yeah.
But we'd get on it in the morning, and like I said, get off at lunch. And Bill Jurgensen was the DP. So when you got on, you know, every time you got off, they had to change the weights.
Yeah.
So he'd say, okay, here, Mike, this is what I want. You get up, lay this out. This is what I want. So you'd go up and you'd find the composition.
Yeah.
Then you come back down
Yeah.
and you show him through the lens. Okay, this is the frame here. This is the frame here. Then you go on and you just carry it on through the end of the sequence.
Yep.
But you did it. You had to do it.
Yeah, and
You
there was a
know.
lot. Was there video assist by that point?
No.
So
No,
he
there
was
was not-
completely trusting on you because
Yeah.
when it's on the dolly on the ground, he can come and look through the
This is
eyepiece
going to
and-
answer
and
your
what-
question.
Yeah.
This was 1975.
Okay.
Yes, it was 19. There was
Could've
no
been.
video assist in
Yeah,
75.
because MASH
Yeah.
ended in like '83, and it was like what 15 seasons.
So there was no video assist. So once again, you didn't see it till the next day.
Yeah.
But the education I got and learning how to lay out shots on that crane was invaluable.
You didn't have headsets, did you?
No.
So you
no.
just
No,
came
when you cut
down
the
to-
camera, you said good.
Your dolly grip came over and talked to you and said, "We're going to come up here," and you just talked through it, and then they just ran you through it. And,
it would just be communication.
Yeah.
That's really important, is the communication
Absolutely.
between the assistant, the operator, and the dolly grip.
Yep. That's
know,
why I was
on the-
asking, because like to not be able to like now we've got the headset, so you can go, "I know, bring me up a little, take me over a little left," or what. And actually now they've got a
They
video,
got
a monitor
they
too.
got a
so
monitor,
they're kind of framing. I mean, it's that's changed that
Yeah.
position.
No, it was all just talk.
So you were on the crane, but even for static shots and stuff, just because you could move it wherever you wanted out on the compound and
Yeah.
whatever.
And it's
So-
a big piece of equipment to
Sure.
move around.
So,
yeah.
so any quote unquote dolly shots on there were just the truck driving along, or
Oh yeah, we did dolly shots too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a lot of dolly shots, mainly on the stage.
yeah. But I'm saying when you're out at the compound.
Oh
like,
sure.
All the moving
Yeah.
shots were on the Chapman. Or
Not
sometimes you
all of
pulled
them. Not all of them, but
Yeah.
but I'd say the
But a lot
majority
of
of them were.
Wow.
Majority of them were.
Yeah.
You know, because it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though it was a big piece of equipment, the crew had been together for a long time. They knew the deal.
Yeah.
You know,
dialed
so
in.
it was you get on the crane. Bill would, they would rehearse. You had to be right next to the DP and the director.
Yeah.
You had to pay attention.
Yep.
Okay, and then Bill would say, okay, this is what I want here. Get on there. This is number one. And then we'd go, okay, move the arm to the left or move it to the, I went the opposite, but move it over here. Okay, let me show you here.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
And, I want you to be higher there. And then, you would come down. It was a lot of communication. You'd come down and say, okay, is this the composition? Yeah. This the height? Yeah.
And basically, when you say, is this a composition, you'd be going, so when I'm down here, I've got, the lamppost in the upper right, and I'm going to the tent over here, and I've got that in the bottom. Is that what you want?
Right.
And so then, where's the director while this is the
talking to the actors?
But while you're actually shooting, is the director just as close to the set as they can be?
Right next to, probably, off to the right or left of the camera.
Just to be able to listen to the
they were right in there with the actors, which I always respected.
Yeah.
I worked with directors both in when monitors came out and feature films that they didn't look at the monitor.
They didn't. It was
Walter
too
Hill
odd
was
for
one
them,
of them.
probably.
Walter Hill was one of them. The last picture I operated was a picture called Delirious with John Candy.
Uh-huh.
Tom Mankiewicz was the director.
Tom Mankiewicz, who wrote the book, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
He was the director. And I remember he said, I don't want monitors. And by that time,
It was normal.
it was normal.
Yeah.
He said, I don't want if I can't trust the operator, I don't want.
That
and
makes
I went,
me so happy.
I went, no, I didn't. I went, oh, shit.
Now it's on you.
Now it's on me again.
You've gotten soft for a couple of years, and you're going to go back to it.
Yeah.
But there's something so cool to me about them going, and it's that thing. And I was there for a little bit on a couple of things where they'd look at you and go, "We okay? Yeah, we're good."
Yeah.
And just it was trust, like you said.
But it was trust, but it was also trust in yourself, too.
Absolutely.
It was trust in you that you got it.
Yeah.
You got what they want.
Yeah.
And then looking through the camera, you're telling their story. But where I would get lost sometimes, I love actors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like what they're doing now, but I love actors.
Yeah.
I could get lost in the story, operating a camera,
And
watching.
forget about the framing and
Sort of.
yeah, I hear you.
I'm sure you do that because
get
you're a
sucked in,
filmmaker.
so you get sucked in sometimes.
You get. I mean, when you get locked into an actor that's not acting
Yep.
and he's telling the story,
It's
and
incredible.
you got the privilege of looking through that camera.
I love that word, the privilege, because sometimes I do feel that. I mean, I was
It
going
is
to
a
ask you that.
privilege. It is a privilege.
Because there are times when you're 3 feet away from someone and you're shooting something, and you there's that part of you that goes, I can't believe I get to be the person right here, the
You're
first
right
audience.
next to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking to him through the lens,
Yep.
even though your lips aren't moving.
Yeah,
It's a privilege.
absolutely. I love that word. Since we're talking about actors, working with actors, you have for someone who's starting out, you have any advice for working with? Look, easy actors, you don't need any advice for. Those people are just. They're great to be around. They're easy, whatever. But there are some actors who are tougher, who are either method actors or they're just, they're just
I
tough
ran into
individuals.
those. Yeah.
Any advice for someone for the first time they run into that and how to
Well,
work
yeah.
with
So
them?
there is. My advice is and what I found is, humility is something that you should carry with you. Communication is another. If you're rehearsing a scene and all the marks are down, and you're rehearsing it and you see that the light's wrong, or he would be better or she would be better if she moved this way, it's to gain their confidence. Mm-hmm. Gain their confidence that you're there to better what they're doing. Mm. You're just an extension of what you're doing. When you gain their confidence, they'll do almost anything you want them to do. If you explain, and this is how I say, I was very privileged and I was very fortunate to come up through the system and learn that all the way from great teachers. And I've mentioned some of them already, and there's many more that I could mention. But when you address an actor, you address that actor with confidence and say, and there'll be times when that actor would say, why would I do that?
Yep.
Why would I do that? Well, you got to have an answer for that.
Yeah.
And sometimes you win, sometimes you won't. Say, well, I just think it's best. It's best. Well, tell me why you think it's best. Well, sometimes it's because of the lighting. And you say, because if you look that way, your face is in shadow. Or if you move over there, I don't see you that well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd be here. You may get an argument. Say, okay, whatever you think.
At a certain point, you back off, right?
At a certain point, you got to back off.
You just realize it's
and then you go to the DP. You go to the DP and say, I try to address this. They're adamant that, no, this is where they'd be.
There's nothing more I can do here. What do you want? How do you want to?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, how do you want to address this?
Yep.
And usually the DPs I worked with, they knew how to address it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's sort of, I mean, for me, it's usually day one. I just, I usually introduce myself. I have a specific thing that I'll ask them or whatever. But I'm sort of gauging how we're going to work together. And then there are those actors who you realize these people don't want to hear anything from me, and so I try not to, you try to do as little as possible with them, just because it's going to backfire.
Yeah, you have to. I don't know, what is that all about?
Yeah.
You're only there to try to help the situation. Like I say, you're part of their acting.
Yeah, exactly. But that said, it's a reality with some actors.
Some of them are assholes.
Look, it's a reality with some directors and some DPs and some operators, right?
Yeah, I ran into those too. But
there's no question about it.
Very, very, very few.
Yeah.
Usually, if you go in and, they know you're trying to learn, they get to a certain point. I operated for 17 years. Mm-hmm. And you get to a certain point where people just trust you, and that's great. But don't ever give up learning. I learned more. I don't want to say more, but I learned from lamp operators. When I moved up to DP, I learned up from grips, things that people would see or suggestions. Be open to that. And as an operator, you got to be open to people's ideas. Mm-hmm. And that'll go back to like me coming from the old school to what I see today and a lot of, compositions that. I remember growing up like that, and this is being redundant, but, oh, no, you didn't do it that way. And at first how it was jarring. Now how I look at it and I go, God damn, they're creative.
Yeah. Yeah, but you've adjusted, right?
I've adjusted to it, and you got to adjust to,
Yeah, I think that there's the reality. There's some shows that I go on where it's like everything is amazing, and it's just like, this is fantastic. And then there's some shows where you go on where either the DP wants you to go, I only want you to go from A to B. I don't want you to think, or whatever. And every show has its. Mm-hmm. And on those shows, I always go, okay, I'm not going to do any creative framing of my own. I'm not going to be, putting my mark on this. So what am I going to work on and what am I going to learn? And it's like, okay, I'm going to work on whip pans on this one, or I'm going to work on working better with the dolly grip. You just constantly find something to
make yourself better.
To make yourself better, exactly.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'm going to make myself better because I'm completely being given free reign, and this is fantastic. And sometimes you go, okay, I got to manufacture what it's going to be on this one. Mm-hmm. But on everything, hopefully, you leave the show and you're better than you were when you came in.
Yeah, and when you run into DPs like that, try to learn something from it.
Yeah. Maybe there's a reason they're doing that.
Maybe there's a reason, and and maybe there's an ego. Who knows?
Yeah, and you can learn something from that. Right?
You can learn something from their ego.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's definitely a business of egos.
It's a big business, and I was kind of a fighter my whole life, and sometimes the ego bothered me. And if I had to do things differently in some respects, I would now. Mm-hmm. But you gotta keep your mind open.
Yeah.
You're going to learn something.
Yeah, but that right there, the fact that you do something differently now means you've learned something, right?
I have. Yeah, I have. And would I do something different today?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to have that opportunity again. I'd love to have that opportunity. Yeah. I see things now, and I don't know a lot of people I see are DPs. I don't know them.
Yeah.
They don't know me either.
Yeah, there's a whole new.
But I'd like to know them. I'd like to go through their head and say, how'd you think of that?
Yeah.
How'd you think of that?
Yeah.
And that's just an open mind.
Because you've worked on a lot of very funny things, and I'm going to throw out Spaceballs, The Goonies, Robin Hood Men in Tights. How do you work on something like that and not laugh when you're on the camera?
It's impossible.
Do you just give up and you say this is...
It's impossible. Because everybody else around you is laughing too.
So, okay.
Yeah. But when the camera starts to shake, Now they got monitors; they see it too,
Yeah.
and they understand. But it's
Yeah.
impossible. Working with Mel Brooks, I was very, very fortunate to work with Mel Brooks, and because of Nick McLean, that's why Mel Brooks helped me in my future career.
Oh, really?
It was Nick McLean.
So
I was Nick McLean's operator on Spaceballs,
Yep.
and
Nick told me that you were operated on Goonies, and he acted in the opening scene or the
Yeah.
opening sequence because he said that like a road was washed out and they couldn't get the actor or something, and someone said, "Nick, you're going to be." I think
Yeah.
he was a plumber. Or
he
something.
was a plumber. Yeah, he was underneath.
That's
He was
hysterical.
one of the kids. Yeah, one of the kids' dads. Yeah. But Nick McLean, Spaceballs was the first picture we did with Mel Brooks, and I was the operator, and Nick was the DP, and there was big sets, as you know. You saw the movie, and I remember a couple times Nick would say, "Mike, we're shooting at stage 15 in a couple of days. Could you go pre-light that set for me?"
No.
Not that he was going to use it.
Yeah.
Shoot a test.
Ah.
I'd say, okay, and he'd give me an electrician, and we'd go over and we'd pre-light it. And we'd go to dailies the next day, and we'd be in dailies, watch our dailies, and then a test would come up. And Mel Brooks would go, "Darn, Nick, I like that. Darn." And Nick said, "Don't thank me, thank Mike."
That's cool. That's very
Can you believe that?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Well, I believe it because I know Nick McLean.
No, and
Yeah.
I know him now that I've
Yeah.
interviewed him. By the
Yeah.
way, anybody who's listening to this, after you're done listening to this, go listen to Nick McLean's interview. He's just, it's kind of amazing to listen to all this. But so basically, going back to that, so basically you can't not laugh.
You can't not laugh. How do you not laugh at Naked Gun?
Yeah.
How do you not laugh at Robin Hood Men in Tights and Dracula and
That's right. That was the other
Spaceballs?
one, Naked Gun. That was the original Naked Gun, right? I remember
That was
seeing
Bobby
that as a
Stevens.
kid and just hysterical.
Yeah, the original Naked Gun, Bobby Stevens,
Yep.
who I got to give a lot of credit to taught me a lot.
Bobby Stevens was the DP.
He was the DP, yes. It was his first movie, and he asked me to operate it. Which was another gift for me. And how do you stop laughing on Naked Gun? I don't know. If you don't laugh at Naked Gun, at the
got a
stupidity of Naked Gun, you got no sense of humor.
Yeah, but usually on those types of movies, I mean, the actors appreciate that, even though it's
Oh
disrupting
yeah.
things.
Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah.
He carried the.
Oh, he had a fart machine.
He had a
with him,
fart
right?
machine. It was going all day long. It was going during the takes. It was going in Mayor Bradley's office when Mayor Bradley came out to meet him when we were at City Hall.
So there's nobody safe.
Nobody is safe.
That's
Nobody.
fantastic.
There was the two young, beautiful Swedish girls came to visit from Sweden. I don't know if they were beauty queens or whatever, to meet Leslie Nielsen on the set in the middle of the conversation. And so I mean, it was fun. It was a fun set every day.
Yeah.
So was Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
Mel Brooks. Goonies was a different story. It wasn't, it wasn't a different story because Dick Donner was the director. Nick McLean's the DP. I mean, that's like dying going to heaven.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, it was just like working with Nick was like, first of all, when I got the call from Nick, you want to hear this story?
Yeah.
This is
Had you operated with him before Goonies?
no.
So
I knew Nick's brother, Steve, Charlie McLean, Steve, before I knew Nick. I knew Nick a little bit, but not
his
much.
brother was in the industry?
His brother's an assistant cameraman. He's retired now.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Steve McLean,
Yeah.
top assistant.
Yeah.
And I knew Nick had moved up, and Bobby Thomas was his operator, who was one of the best. And I was having a rough period in my life. I had a little problem with substance.
Gotcha.
And I had quit substance. 40 years. It's 40 years now.
Yeah.
But it was a tough time.
Well, that wasn't abnormal back then.
No,
A
it
lot of
wasn't.
people
It was
were involved.
rampant. But
Yeah.
I just happened to be born with the addictive gene.
Yeah, sure.
And I went to work. I did my work, and there were a lot of times it was hard, but I always showed up and could do the job. I was blessed that way too. But your reputation follows you a little bit. And the guy's a little crazy.
Yeah.
And Nick knew I was a little. I could be a little crazy.
You, by this point, are an established operator.
I'm an established operator.
You've been working for enough time.
And I've done a
to-
lot of big movies of the week, a lot
Yeah.
of big miniseries, and
Yeah.
and like I said, I had a pretty good career. But I wanted to work for Nick McLean, and he had moved up a couple years before, and I kept telling Charlie, his brother, Steve, he goes by Steve in the business.
I got you.
Why don't you get me a job with your brother? But it never happened for the first couple of years. And I'm working on a television series with Ed Brown Sr., who was another great teacher of mine. And I'm just setting up shots and not, paying attention. But now I'm sober. I'm clean and sober.
Mm-hmm.
I've been clean and sober for just a short time.
Yeah.
But through Steve, his brother, Steve tells Nick, O'Shea's cleaning his act up. And this will bring tears to my eyes. Unbeknownst to me, I'm just setting a shot up on Remington Steel.
Remington Steel.
Yeah, and Ed Brown Sr.
Yeah.
And a guy comes out, Grepper electrician guy, says, "Hey, your friend Nick McLean's back there. He wants to talk to you."
He's visiting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, "Oh, okay."
But you said you
didn't
didn't know him.
I had met
You
him.
knew who
I'd met him a couple times.
Yeah, but
I knew of him. I mean, who didn't know Nick McLean?
That's what I heard. Yeah.
And I said, okay. So I go back and hey, buddy, how you doing? You've met him. You know what kind of person. How you doing? It's good. I was on the stage.
Heard you were
not
here.
give me any clues about anything. I just wanted to come over and say hi to you. And I said, yeah, and we had a nice conversation, and he left. So I go on and we finish the day, whatever, and one day I'm out on a B camera, got a one-day call on something. Like I said, new operators, new assistants, don't turn down any day.
Take everything. Yeah.
Take everything. So PA comes to me and says, "Oh, your wife called the office. She wants you to call home right away." I thought, oh, God, what's wrong? I call home, and Sharon says, "Nick McLean wants you to call him right away." This is emotional for me.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, okay." So I got a payphone, called him. "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm doing good. I'm at Santa Monica Airport and doing some extra camera on some TV show." He said, "Well, listen, I want to ask you something. Would you? I'm doing this picture, Cannonball Run 2." And he says, "I want to know, would you be interested in operating for me?" And I said, "Well, sure." I said, "What, BC camera?" He says, "No, I want you to be the main guy." Wow.
That's a big thing from him.
I mean, First of all, Nick McLean was one of the best operators in the world.
That's what everybody says. Yeah. He said the same thing about you, by the way.
Well, and I'm thinking he's asking me to be his A operator, something that I really aspired to.
Yeah. This is the call.
This is the call. Yeah. I said, "Are you kidding?" He says, "No." So, and the movie was Cannonball Run 2. So I got that job. I did that job. And I don't know at what point. Burt Reynolds was in the show, of course, and he was the no, Hal Needham was the director. Burt was just the actor.
Yeah. And Burt and Nick were like best friends.
Well, Burt made Nick a camera.
Yeah.
Burt was wonderful.
Yeah.
Then Nick got a picture with Burt directing called Stick.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what was going on, but I didn't know if I was going to be offered the movie. It was my first movie with him.
Yeah.
But we were getting along good. And he said, "I'm going to do this picture with Burt. He's going to direct next, and I want you, and so does Burt." And I said, "Oh, wow."
That's cool.
I mean, I can't understate how that changed my career as an operator.
Really?
Working for Nick McLean.
Yeah.
Working for Nick McLean. I mean, I did well. I did very well in television as an operator, very well. And I worked with Owen Roisman as an operator.
Oh, wow.
And I worked with John Alonzo, and I worked with a lot of them. You might mainly be cameras. Mainly be cameras. That's a big point here. I went to work for Nick McLean. I was Nick McLean's operator. Do you know how many doors that opened up for me as an A camera operator with many cameramen?
Just because Nick
McLean,
who's the best operator around, thinks that you're a great operator, that opens doors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just opened so many doors.
That's amazing.
But I think I did 11 movies with Nick.
Wow.
And I would be loyal to Nick to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people changed my career, but that loyalty is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And when I operated for Owen, and I got a nice break with Owen, and that was through Bobby Stevens because he was Owen's operator at the time. He brought me. Owen was new in L.A. and he wanted to meet as many operators, and Bobby brought me in as a B operator, and Owen liked me.
Mm-hmm.
But with Owen, when he offered you something, you had to take it, and there was no knock on him. I understood it because I loved him he was a very good friend of mine. But when he offered you something, he expected you to take it. But I learned that loyalty came first.
Yeah.
And I worked with Ed Brown Jr. for many years, and he was doing another show. And when Owen said, I got this show, can you do it? I said, I've already committed to somebody else.
Yeah.
With Nick, none of that was a problem.
He understood.
Yeah. That's just who he is.
Yep.
But the part that I want to tell you is I always wanted to operate for Nick McLean. And then on stick, on the picture, we're in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I never asked him why all of a sudden I was his operator. I never asked that question. But one day he just walked up to me. It was a beautiful sunny day down there. And he said, hey, come here, O'Shea. I want to talk to you. He said, did you wonder why I asked you to do this movie? And I said, yeah, I have. I didn't think it was my place to ask you, He said, well, I'm going to tell you why I asked you. He says, I always knew you were a good operator, Mike. He said, but I heard you had a wild streak. And he said, my brother Steve told me, Mike is trying to change his life. Mm-hmm. He says, you've put away things that gotten away of my family and everything, that you're trying to clean all that up. And he says, I admire that. That's the story of Nick McLean.
That's incredible.
Nick McLean was not only the best operator. I know he said I was the best operator. I disagree with him.
Well, he said you were the best operator he'd ever worked with, so maybe he took himself out of that.
No, he actually the assistant actually told me one day when it was on a Saturday or something. We were down in Florida because we had the weekends off. The assistant. I forget his name. It wasn't Steve Smith because Steve came later.
This was on Stick.
Stick.
Yeah.
Nick and he had to go out and do a little some running shots or something, and Nick said, "Just stay in. I'll go out and do it." And I guess he and the assistant were talking, and I don't know if Nick remembers this, but the assistant told me. He said, the assistant knew how good Nick was. And Nick said to him, he says, I'm pretty good with this, but I'm not as good as O'Shea.
On the wheels, you mean?
Yeah.
That's high praise.
But let me tell you something. He was.
Yeah.
He's just that kind of guy.
Yeah.
He's just that kind of guy.
Talking to him, he seemed like that. He's very low key and humble. And
he's very humble. I mean, I would ask him questions, I would ask, how do you know what to do over these? I don't. That's why I hire the gaffer. and that's not true. Look at some of his films.
Yeah, but he
gives everybody else credit.
That's great.
He gives everybody else credit.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Don't get on the bad side of him, though.
Yeah. What a gift to be able to work with someone like that,
It's
Yeah.
What else can I say?
Sure.
You work with the best, you learn from the best.
Absolutely, and hopefully you step up to that level, right?
You try to, but going back to the television, because in those days people kind of feature people look down on.
It's not that way
the
anymore,
TV
but
guys.
It used to be like, that's TV.
That's
and they don't
TV.
know
They're
what they're
TV.
doing.
But let me go back to the crane part.
Yeah.
When we were doing Cannonball Run, and we were on a crane, and I would get things on the first take.
Because you had done so much on MASH.
Because I'd done so much on TV,
Yep.
on MASH, on Westerns, How the Westerns won. I did that miniseries on the crane outside. Ed Plant Sr., Jr., you're on that crane, you learn all that. Now I go on and I start doing Cannonball Run, and we're on the crane at times. And, you know what the movie's about, and you're panning these cars going 80 miles an hour on the crane, and you get it in the first take, and somebody says, you got that on the first take?
Yeah.
It's all that experience you get.
Yeah.
Don't look down on TV, but no, I don't think they do anymore.
No, it's not that way. The only thing that's different now, I think, is just the schedule. I mean, you have more time on a feature, but in a weird way, and exactly for what you're saying, because I kind of came out of TV, and I'm still in TV, but I do features and whatever. I think it's easier to be in TV and get used to that schedule and get used to you don't have all day to do this shot, and then go on to features and you go,
I got
"You
all
got
day
6
to do
hours
it."
to do this shot.
Yeah,
All right, well, I don't need it, but that's
Yeah.
great. Then the other way around, I think feature people who are solely feature people who come onto a TV schedule
Yeah.
will look at that and go, how are we going to do all this work? And
Yeah.
it's just, I get it. Was there a big thing back then of looking down on people who
I
did
don't know
TV?
I don't know. Maybe I misspoke about looking down, but you were considered television.
It was just meat and
Yeah,
potatoes, sort
yeah.
of.
I mean, you might have been doing the biggest miniseries in town.
yeah, but it
But
was
you're still doing
TV.
television.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
box was smaller.
Yeah. I
Well,
think
let
there
me-
definitely was. And actually, it's interesting that you say that because, television was 4:3, right? And,
Yeah.
and movies were 16:9 or 2:35 or whatever the aspect ratio was. And that's no longer the case. So that might also be part of what blurs the line. There's also a lot more money in TV and there's more time in TV than there was. It's different than back then.
Yeah.
But I think TV was sort of like keep them in the center of the frame and, when they move.
Not if you work for Howard Schwartz.
Is that right?
No.
Yeah.
Not if you work for Bill Drux and Eddie Brown.
Yeah, okay.
Not for those guys were talented guys. They were from the old, Howard Schwartz worked with Orson Welles, and
Wow.
Magnificent Ambersons. I mean, I was the operator on it.
Yeah.
These people were artists.
Yeah.
They were artists. They taught you how to be you had to have an eye, but they taught you how to be an artist. They taught you what it meant,
Yeah.
That's cool. Every step of the way.
You fell in with the right people, right?
I was very blessed.
Yeah,
I was,
yeah.
and like going back when I got to Howard Schwartz with his contacts, he kept pushing me, and so that's how I got to do what I got to do.
Sure.
And the projects he got were big television shows or big miniseries or movies of the week.
Yep.
So I got a good reputation with him in television. And if you worked working for Nick, it opened a lot of doors for me in the operating world. Working for Howard opened a lot of doors for me. And I'm not downplaying anybody else, but it opened a lot of doors for me as an operator in TV.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And Howard did movies too, but mainly TV.
That was more word.
But he worked all the time. He was a working cameraman.
So I have to ask you this as a Steadicam operator. Do you remember the first time you saw Steadicam? Or when it started to become, be a thing?
Late 70s.
Uh-huh.
Garrett Brown.
Garrett Brown, really? Remember what it was on?
Was it Bound for Glory?
Well, he did Bound for Glory. Were you on Bound for Glory?
No. Oh, the first time I saw
Yeah,
it.
no, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I knew that's when first time when you worked with it.
I think really, did we do Steadicam on stick? No, we didn't do it on stick.
Or one of the early times, if it's not the
TV,
first.
did we do it on TV?
I don't know if there was much Steadicam
I don't think
on
so.
TV.
I'll tell you the first
the
time I
80s.
really,
Yeah.
at this moment I'm aware of was City Heat with Nick.
Okay. Remember who the operator was?
Steve St. John.
Steve St. John.
Yeah.
And do you remember? So when was this? Like maybe
83,
83,
84,
okay. So
84.
it'd been around for a little bit.
It'd
but
been
it
around
still,
a little bit, yeah.
It still wasn't normal. Do you remember? You remember what your thoughts were? Was it crazy or was it cool or was
He was good.
Yeah.
He was really good. The only thought I'll tell you, and this is just being transparent,
Yeah.
was sometimes I thought, well, why are they doing that with that when they could do it with a dolly?
With a dolly. Yeah.
I wouldn't think that way today because you see some of the guys are doing Steadicam and that. It's just
It's a different thing now than it was then. Yeah.
But Steve was really good.
Yeah.
Steve was really good, and I was impressed with it.
Yeah.
And I was impressed with it. And Steve went on to work with us on several pictures.
Uh-huh.
But that's the first time I think I really, going back, would be City Heat, I think.
Yeah.
I'll tell you my story about the Steadicam when we were
Yeah.
doing the How the West Was Won. It was a miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
Tucson, Arizona, 1977. Garrett Brown was doing another show at Tucson and Steadicam. They were thinking, the producers got a hold of Garrett Brown's in town.
He's in town. And
Get
there were only
Mi-
a couple Steadicam operators.
Yeah.
then.
Yeah. Get Mike on our day off Sunday. Get him with Garrett Brown. We want him to do Steadicam.
They want you to do Steadicam.
They want me to learn how to do Steadicam.
Okay.
Okay, so they set it up. So I meet Garrett Brown. Johnny Jensen was the assistant.
Johnny Jensen, yeah.
I meet Garrett Brown on a Sunday, and he puts the rig on me. And he's got me running all over the place. And I'm terrible. I am terrible. It's floating all over the place. And I'm pretty established as an operator.
But
at this time.
it's a different.
It was a different thing,
It's apples and oranges,
and I didn't have the patience for it.
Yep.
I said, Garrett, thank you for your time. After a couple hours, my back was killing me.
Oh yeah.
I says, put it on Johnny.
Oh.
Johnny will do better than me. I said, I'm going back to my room. And Johnny did do better than me, but we never used it.
And that was that.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
in fairness, also back then, if it was 77, Garrett probably hadn't figured out how to be a Steadicam operator yet. He was still figuring that out. The gear didn't quite
Yeah,
do
it
what
hurt.
it's supposed to
I
do.
remember it was painful.
Well, we joke now that when we teach the students that we teach, there's so many vests and there's so many this and there's so many that, trying to fit it, whatever. And what was it like when you started? It was like you put it on and you go, is this supposed to hurt like this? And yeah, it hurts like that. Just deal with it. Get through it.
Well, that was my experience, but it hurt too much.
It was painful. Yeah.
I was thinking more about the pain than I was
Yeah, sure.
what I was supposed to be thinking.
Well,
about.
you were right at the beginning, and who knows
Yeah.
how those things weren't ergonomic by any means. I want to ask you two specific things, which are as I said at the beginning, you've been involved in the union. You've been a board member for, it sounds like, over almost 50 years.
Yeah. I think it was the early 70s.
Yeah,
70s.
so you were on the board of 659, which was the West
659,
Coast Union,
yeah.
and then through
In
the
the
merger
merger.
when we became the International.
Yes.
Would you just talk about being involved in the union? Is that an important thing for
Very
people?
important. I'm still, although I'm an alternate, now I don't get to be involved in the NAB as much because I'm an alternate, but I was very involved into this last term, I'm still involved because I go to the West Coast regional meetings.
Yeah.
It's just a big deal for me because unionism is a big deal for me. I grew up with unions.
Why? What's
Because of all the protections we have.
Yeah.
Because I've got health care. I'm a retired member of Local 600. I've got health care for my wife. I've had health care for my children.
Yeah.
My son is an assistant cameraman. He's got health care. He's got health care for his children. And we've had union leaders all through the years that have fought for that.
Yeah.
And I believe in that. I believe that people should be involved in unionism. And I'll tell you where I learned this the most was Howard Schwartz, because he was big in the union. He used to take me to the board meetings before I was a member of the board.
Oh, really?
So I want you to find out what happens in the union. Just to be a union member doesn't mean much. Find out what the union does for you and speak up.
Yep.
And through that relationship with Howard, going and sitting in those board meetings when it was still across the street from where it is now.
Yeah.
Sitting in there, Joe Byrock smoking the cigars and people yelling at each other. Sitting there learning about it, listening to Bill Fraker and listening to all these guys that have been around, how important unions were. Yeah. And it got ingrained in me. And nowadays with all the union turmoil that's going, I don't know if turmoil is the right word, is to understand, and I'm going to say this on this, is because we spoke about it sooner, and you can cut it out if you need to.
Yeah.
But when the last negotiations, when we had John Lindley as our president and Rebecca Ryan as our business agent,
Yeah.
I've been in the union a long time, and I'm not downplaying anybody else because I have other favorites too.
Sure.
But with the negotiations that went on 3 years ago, and I saw the division in our union,
Yeah. Yeah.
it affected me as an old-timer. And maybe you don't want to hear what an old-timer's got to say,
I do.
but I got to tell you something. There's a fine line in negotiations.
Yeah.
And when John Lindley and Rebecca Ryan spoke, I trusted them.
Yep.
I trusted them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to have an open mind to listen to everybody. I mean, I'll listen to younger people or older people that are angry because they don't think they got whatever they think they should get. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? You got to work to earn what you get.
Yeah.
And I've been a privileged person in this town of Hollywood. I've been lucky, but I've had good people, and the union always stood behind me. I remember in the early days when we had to call Herb Aller, who was our business agent, who would yell at you.
Really?
You'd call him and say, "Hey, Herb, what the hell? You know how busy I am?" And he'd go off for 5 minutes, but then you say, "Okay, what's your problem, Mike?"
Things have changed a little bit.
Yeah, but what's your problem?
Yeah.
What can I do for you?
He was still there.
Yeah.
At the end of it. He was still
What can I do for you? What's bothering you? Things have changed.
Yeah.
So I learned who to trust and who maybe to be a little leery of. But unions have done nothing but good for me.
Yep.
Do I think we could do better? I don't know if it's me thinking that we could do better or I hope we can do better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I knew, and I'm not, because of the new regime which we have now, I'm wishing them all the best. I wouldn't want to be sitting up there.
It's a tough job.
It's a tough job up there. And, but the last one we had, John Lindley, I'm a big fan of John Lindley.
Yeah.
I love John
He's a
Lindley.
great
I love him as a man,
Yep. He's a good man.
you know, and Rebecca.
Yep.
And I know the turmoil we had because I was still, seated.
Yep.
I mean, I wasn't afraid. I think you were on the board, and I wasn't afraid to stand up and tell people to shut up.
I remember that very well.
Because you got to understand there is a fine line.
Yeah.
Now, with the negotiations with SAG and the writers and DGA, there was no problem. They got theirs fast. There's a fine line there, and there's a morality issue for me.
Yeah. Yep.
You know,
Agreed.
if you're out there picketing and you're out there, whatever you're doing, fine. That's great. I would be too. But there's a fine line. Right now, a lot of people are losing their homes.
Yeah.
They're losing their insurance,
Healthcare. Yeah.
health care.
Savings.
To me, that's a moral issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
For another nickel.
Yeah. It's a tough one.
I don't know if that made sense, but that's where my heart is.
No, I totally. But I think that the key to all of it is you've been involved for 50 years. And I think you would agree with me. I mean, I would assume that you would agree with me, but you'll tell me. It's not a lot of fun. It's really frustrating. There are times where you smack your head against the wall and you go, I cannot believe this is what we're doing or whatever. But the alternative is sitting on the outside and just griping as opposed to getting involved and going, I'm going to be a part of it. And there are times where I go, this is just driving me nuts because, and it's not our union, it's any large group of people who try to get together to make decisions because sometimes it's inefficient and this and that and the other. But if you're going to get upset about it, you need to get involved and find out how it works and figure. And I think the beginning of that is going, like you said, to the Western Regional Council meetings or Eastern Regional or whatever region you're in, obviously, which are once a month, and
going to the general membership meetings.
And going to the general membership meetings, which is once a year, and also, by the way, if you want to go to the National Executive Board, all you got to do is call, meetings, which are 3 times a year. All you got to do is call a business agent and say, I'd like to go, and you can get an invite and this and that and the other. And it's funny because I've had people say, oh, so you can't just show up, so nobody's allowed. And I go, no, it's not that at all. They need a head count, and they need to know for food and for this and for that. But people aren't kept out. But
we need you.
Yeah, well,
we need you.
That's exactly right.
You're the next generation from me, probably.
Yeah.
You know, we need that. And people have asked me many times, why do you still do that? I say because I was blessed to have it.
And you're paying it forward. I mean,
I'm just trying to pay it forward. You don't have to agree with me.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
but I have to tell you what my concerns are.
And the thing is, you want a room full of different. You want intelligent, educated opinions, but you want a room full of different opinions.
Hey, I've learned from a lot of the younger members of the board.
Yep.
I've learned from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I've learned which ones not to pay attention to.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, sometimes the ones that I don't want to pay attention to are the ones that are doing the most talking.
Yeah, that does happen sometimes. There's pluses and minuses. But officially, thank you for all that you've done for the union. I appreciate it. And part of the reason that I'm in where I'm in now is because people like you did the work before me, and I feel like I want to pass it on, and then hopefully the next generation will. The other question I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned family. Can you just talk about having a family and being in this business and how you maintain that and going on location, and it's not an easy business.
It's not an easy business, and I will talk about my family because somebody asked me what would your legacy? What do you think who you like as your legacy, Mike? And And I thought about it, and I probably didn't have the answer right away because I've had my awards and I've had a good career, and I thank God for that. I thank God for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I thank God for everything. But what my legacy is, yes, there were times I was gone 6 months at a time.
Yeah.
There were times 3, 4, 5 months. I was gone a lot. I was blessed to marry a woman who was patient, didn't need me, very independent, didn't need me, stuck with me through the hard times, which we talked about, until she couldn't, until she was going to take the kids and leave. That's when I changed. Started.
Maybe that's
changing.
what had to happen. Right?
That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
had to go through
Yep.
go through what I went through to get to where.
Yep.
And I saw a look in her eyes that said, "Oh man, I got to do something. I don't want to lose my kids.
Yeah.
I didn't want to lose her either.
Yeah.
And I changed my life. So my legacy is that I'm married to the same woman I married July 10th, 1965. My kids love me, and my grandkids love me. My family loves me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And I had that basis. I had that from my mom and dad. I had that with my brother and that. But I have, going out into the world on my own, being kind of the insecure guy I was, and how substances made me feel a part of, and then getting into programs, recovery programs, and finding out who Mike O'Shea is a pretty good legacy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But having my wife, Sharon, my daughter, Patty, my son, Sean, who was a top-notch assistant, who I always wanted to make an operator, but he said, no, I don't want to be an operator. He says, I got it made here.
He's happy where he's at. Yep.
Yeah, he says, I'm content here.
Yep.
I think would have been a better operator than me and a better DP than me.
Yeah.
But he said, no, I don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't want it. I'm happy.
Yeah.
The family of my granddaughters, I'm a happy guy.
Yeah.
I'm a happy guy, So I think family, for me, I know it doesn't always work out. I was just one of the lucky ones, the blessed ones.
Yeah.
That I had a strong woman that, like I say, she didn't need me. She wasn't an enabler.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she'd smack me upside the head at times, straighten out. Not physically, but she didn't have to. But I was blessed to be able to pay attention and say, I don't want to lose this.
Yeah.
I lose this, I could have the best career in the world. But I lost the ones I love the most.
So what's the point, right?
What's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point?
That's wonderful. I want to ask you, switching gears a little bit, as a DP or even as an operator, what do you look for when you're looking at someone? What makes a good operator or a great operator? What are you looking for?
Like if I had a guy on a big camera, or something, and I'd see what they were doing, and maybe the compositions were good and everything, but they would miss maybe a little lighting thing that was important to me. And I can remember saying this to somebody, and he actually used it in an interview. I said, now that you know how to steer the camera, and I said, and I'm very happy with what you're doing as far as composition and communication. I said, but what I was taught is when you get to that part of your operating career where you're comfortable and you're smooth and you can pull off any shot that they throw at you, start thinking like a cameraman. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, look and ask the cameraman more questions. Mm-hmm. Why are you doing that? Because if you want to be that, you may have a vision, but find out what his vision is, how he's telling the story, how he's translating the story from the director to himself, from the script. Find out what their thinking is, and think like a cameraman. Mm-hmm. Even in your operating, you're watching the lighting for the cameraman. When certain cameraman you work for, there were definitive lines. You had to hit these lines, and ask why you want, why, what's that composition? Why do you see that composition?
Yeah.
And he'll explain to you what part of the story that tells.
Yeah.
Don't be mechanical. Be fluid. Mm-hmm. Be open. And like was told to me, no question is dumb. No question is dumb. What I always look for in an operator is a guy who paid attention. And what I learned, and this is a big part of what I learned, when I went to work for Ed Brown Jr., was a senior, was from New York. Do you remember him?
I don't.
Well, he came out here from New York and did a big mini-series called Blind Ambition. It was Watergate, John Dean, Watergate. Yeah. It's like an 8-hour miniseries. So I got the job as the A operator. And after a few days, and he, after we were shooting, in a few days, he said, okay, now I know you know how to do that. He said, but I like to work the English method. I said, okay. He said, you know what that means? I said, well, I kind of have an idea. He says, that means you're going to set up all the shots. You're going to talk. You're going to work with the director. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And so he let me do that. I didn't particularly want to be honest with you. But I said, okay, I'll do that. And after a while, he says, now, I like to light. That's what I like to do. Mm-hmm. I trust you as an operator. Because you'd have to show him where the compositions were, the framing, so he knew where to put the lights. He says, but what I see in you're going to be a DP. And at that time, that was, I was happy operating. Yeah. I said, I don't want to be a DP. And he said, but no, you're going to be a DP. And he says, you know what? You notice most DPs, they line up the shots. And when the operator doesn't get that chance and he moves up to a DP, now he's got to help line up the shots. Yeah. So now I'm giving you an opportunity that was given to me. You're going to work with the director. So that's going to improve your relationship with the director.
Yep.
So then when you move up to DP and you hire an operator, of course, when you first start out, you're going to want to line up the shots. Mm-hmm. He said, but when you have that operator that you trust and you're going to get, of course, by then you had monitors, but you're going to get what you're asking for, you got all the time in the world to do what lighting you need to do.
Yeah.
So what I looked for in an operator was that.
Yeah.
I was given that opportunity with Ed. He was the first one that really said, now you're gonna start setting the shots up.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Does that make sense to you?
No, absolutely, 100%. That's fantastic.
And then also how that helps is when you become a DP and you get with a director that's laying out shots, especially in television, that are impossible to light, with that experience as an operator, as a DP now with that experience, you know how to say, hey, what do you think of this? If I do this 360 on a TV schedule, that might take me 2 hours to light that. Let me show you this, and you can get on the camera and make a move for him, maybe 180 degrees.
Yeah.
Say that's going to take 45 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. You can coax it into something that's doable.
And if he doesn't like it, if he says, no, I want this one, let's get a Steadicam in and do this, then you got to do it.
Yeah. But at least you give them the option.
But that experience, you have.
Yeah. Well, Mike, this has been fantastic. There's so much great information. I appreciate the stories, and it's so great to sit down and talk with you.
Well, thanks a lot for asking me. I'm sorry that I've been a pain not being able to get
you
here.
Haven't at all. That's what schedules are like.
When you mentioned, you said
you're enjoying your retirement. That's what you should do.
I'm enjoying it. I miss it a little bit. I miss seeing guys like you, and I miss seeing people ask me, what do you miss about the business? I said, really, what I miss about it is I miss being with my crews.
Yeah.
The people that I worked with.
I get it.
And what I do miss now is watching all these movies and saying, oh my God, I wished I would have done it that way.
I get it. I get it. The question that I leave everybody with is someone who's starting in the business now, someone who's maybe moving up to operating, or even you talking to Mike O'Shea 40, 50 years ago. What advice would you give to someone on how to succeed in this business?
Pay attention. Ask questions. No question is dumb. Be creative, even when you're not. No question is dumb. When you see something you like, if you're working with somebody and you see something you like, if you get the opportunity, ask them how they came to that. How'd you come to that? What made you think of that? Just be open and ask questions. That's what worked for me. There were times when I was afraid to ask people questions. There were times. But I tried to pay attention to what they were doing. Be bold. Take chances. But how you learn to be bold and take chances is ask questions.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Don't forget to check us out on theop.io for all sorts of information on operating and storytelling. So thanks for listening and have a great day.